this is a crazy playoff picture, right? The Sixers, in theory, this is not very likely, but in theory can be anywhere from what? 4th
The
or
8th. Yeah.
to 8th, and wide range of outcomes. They have one of the most important Eastern Conference games on the schedule that is left between them and Orlando. The Magic, who I think we had put out of sight, out of mind for a while, have now gone from, hey, they look like a pretty comfortable, they're going to be sitting in 4, to the Sixers might pass them at the end of the season and jump out of the play-in tournament. And so there's so many moving parts, right? Like, so for example, Giannis Antetokounmpo gets hurt last night, leaves their game, and potentially, depending on the severity of the injury, depending on how long he has to stay out, that could be a boon for whoever plays them in the first round of the playoffs. For the Sixers, it's unfortunate timing because they could use some help from Milwaukee tonight. Milwaukee beating Orlando either tonight or in the season finale on Sunday will give the Sixers a much needed win against Orlando to help them climb out of the play-in tournament. So we're going to just be sitting here. I'm going to be like, what's his name? Zach Galifianakis in the Hangover when they're playing blackjack and he's got all the numbers floating around his head. That's going to be me with playoff scenarios over the next 3-4 days. I think where I'm at, and it's why I think we ended up with the thumbnail text that we did, I just think you want to avoid the Celtics as long as possible. And I know there's some people in the chat online and elsewhere who believe they just get, if you're going to have to go through them, you might as well do it early while Joel is semi-healthy. I am not of that mindset. I think you just hope that somebody else beats them.
My counter to that is, so like if you're saying I don't trust Joel to be healthy in the Eastern Conference Finals, who do you think you're beating in the Eastern Conference Finals without Joel Embiid?
Yeah.
So I understand the sentiment, because if Joe goes down, obviously you have no chance against Boston. And Joe going down is probably more likely than anything happening to the Celtics. But if you say the Sixers have a 20% chance of beating the Celtics in round 1 without Joel Embiid, or with Joel Embiid, the question then becomes, is there a 20% chance of another team beating Boston or an injury to Boston changing them? I think you probably want to wait to play them as long as possible, because upsets do happen. The top seed in the conference, the best team in the conference, doesn't always make the conference finals. I think you want to give as much time for it to play out as possible. I do think you want to make sure that you get a little bit of, and quite frankly, as good as they've looked, they haven't really been playing playoff caliber opponents right now.
No.
You want to give them time to get back into a rhythm so that if they're healthy in the Eastern Conference Finals, they have a real chance. I do think you want to avoid them.
Always want to avoid Boston. The one thing that you can look back on, of course, it's a different team than it was last season, where you have Drew Holiday now in the mix, previously with the Milwaukee Bucks, now with the Boston Celtics, and they're a different type of team. They have a huge lead right now, folks, over the rest of everybody else in the Eastern Conference by 14 games. It's not even close. So even when Milwaukee, for them, beats them the other night, didn't matter. It was what it was. They beat them, but they have a big enough cushion where they're not afraid of anybody. But Drew Holiday makes the team that much different. So when you go back to, if you're a Sixer fan and you say, well, guys, what are you talking about avoiding them? You played them to a Game 7 last season in the second round, also having a 3-2 lead while winning 2 on their home floor. Why are you afraid of them now? Well, I guess the answer would be just simply because of the Porzingis and Drew Holiday additions from what the team was a season ago and how much of a machine they have seemed to be this year. Now, the Sixers did beat them in the first game. Since then, they have not beaten them. They did play them well when I believe it was Maxey and Embiid, or one of the two were out. Patrick Beverly went nuts in that game in Boston, and they almost beat them in that primetime game. And that was that the other night that we were at the Chegg when they were playing the Boston Celtics? And that was the same one? Okay, so
they did play Boston when we were at Chegg.
It was a different. The one you're referring to with Pat Bev was in, I want to say December.
That was December, but they played them close.
Yes.
And both of those games. Now, Joel Embiid wasn't there for the second one when Patrick Beverly was going off, but you do want to avoid the Boston Celtics until you can't any longer. That said, I'm sure we'll talk ourselves into certain matchups if and when they do get there to face them in the Eastern Conference Finals, which it most likely would be in this scenario. But for right now, looking at the draw and where they are right now, with the chance of moving all the way up to 4, falling all the way to 8th, But the way that they have been playing, of course, we think that they have a really good chance against not only Brooklyn on Sunday, but Orlando on Friday, that this team could be very dangerous going in. And with that, you avoid Boston, sure, but the draw for everyone else, Derek, from New York to, depending on what Orlando does, Cleveland, Indiana, are you really that worried about any of those people as you, of course, focus on the Boston Celtics later on?
No, you're not worried about anyone in the East outside of Boston. You really aren't. And the only other team that was playing, or that you would conceptually be worried about, Milwaukee has A, been a 500 team for quite a while now, and B, they have a little bit of an injury concern here with their star player.
Are coached by Doc Rivers.
Are coached by Doc Rivers, yes. So no, I don't think you're really worried about anyone. Kyle brought it up, but the Giannis news. So he had a calf strain in last night's game. The MRI came back with his Achilles is fine, or at least intact, is the way it was phrased by Woj. That's good news in the long term for Milwaukee, which if you meet them in the first round, that comes into play. But you wonder how cautious they're going to be over the next, the rest of the regular season. That's important for the Sixers because Milwaukee plays Orlando twice. You need Orlando to lose one game in addition to the one they play against the Sixers, so you need them to lose 2 of 3. If Milwaukee is going to rest Giannis, that would impact that, so we'll see how that plays out. But no, you're not worried about anyone. I mean, Cleveland's not playing great basketball. New York has their own injury concerns, including Randall being out.
And OG Anunoby is back, but
Miami
he can't stay in the lineup.
Just can't score. When they played down the stretch the other night, their only real offense was bank threes and bullshit from Jimmy, and that's it. You should be able to shut that team down. And the Hawks and all that, they stink. You don't have to talk about them.
Trae Young's coming back.
Sure, that's fine. That 9-10 game will be lit. No, there's nobody in the East outside of Boston that you're scared of, really at all. I might go as far as to say I would make the Sixers a favorite over, probably still if Giannis is playing, you make the Bucks favorite. Outside of that, Sixers might be favored in almost every series.
We all silly like the mayor.